First thing, which may not be the most important thing, but it is the first thing, because I haven't touched on it at all today, is about the attack on the media that's been expressed by Elon Musk. And you've talked to us before about the free press and about this cherished aspect of American democracy. The grabbing of the information is one of the first priorities of a rising authoritarian.
Right.
And what Elon Musk is doing now is looking for a massive crackdown on free speech. Again, Trump's gone after CBS and the 60 Minutes thing, also ABC and the Stephanopoulos thing. Speak to what's happening with Elon Musk and how he wants to take down free speech and the media.
Well, so Elon Musk said that CBS, presumably meaning people at CBS and specifically at 60 Minutes, should serve long prison sentences. And what's this about? Well, 60 Minutes did an interview with Kamala Harris. They would have done one with Donald Trump, but he wouldn't sit down with them. And Trump accused CBS of manipulating the edits to take answers from one question and apply them to another to hurt him, and filed a lawsuit demanding $10 billion in damages. Of course, since he won election, it's a little hard to understand why he suffered any damages. The FCC appointee of Donald Trump insisted that the transcripts be handed over. So CBS said, sure. And they gave over the transcripts, which show absolutely nothing improper happened. This was a perfectly normal television edit, and the transcript shows that Donald's complaint's bogus. So what follows is, number one, Donald says, oh, I'm suing you not for $10 billion, but for $20 billion. For over an election he won. And then Elon Musk says long prison sentences. The intention here is very clear. It's to try and intimidate journalists into only towing the line. The Associated Press refers to the Gulf of Mexico by its proper name, the Gulf of Mexico. As a result, they are barred from the White House and from Air Force One. This is the major American shared news service that they're doing this to. And the President of the United States does not have the authority to change geographic names. There is a U.S. board, which he controls, and they've voted for the name change. But there are two international boards, one under the UN and one in the cartographic world, that have changed this. And I posted on my Facebook page something my son Andrew, always playful, even in his 50s, Andrew sent me. It's a map of where he and I grew up around Santa Cruz that renames Monterey Bay the Gulf of Santa Cruz, or some wags have said, well, it should be the Bay of Santa Cruz. But, you know, we can go call things by all sorts of crazy names, but that doesn't make that it's correct. And authoritarians want incorrectness. They don't want you to know the history. Remember George Smith, the principal figure in George Orwell's 1984. What was his job? It was to, oh, here's a news article from the past. We don't like it. You rewrite the article and change the archive so that people don't know, so that the three big countries can continue their war and picking the pockets of the ordinary people.
By going after these news organizations this way, it's a shakedown, right? The money is a shakedown.
Yes.
But the Musk jailing of them, that imprisoning of them, does up that ante. And David, you probably didn't even need to do that, because you, as Donald Trump, have control over various merger regulatory green lights that they're looking for from government. Right. They don't want to get on your bad side anyway.
Right. Well, the reason I think you saw Jeff Bezos, Dr. Patrick Xiansheng, who owns the Los Angeles Times, and others bow to Donald Trump is because they have other commercial interests. If you're the owner of the LA Times, your primary business is pharmaceuticals. And of course, the FDA can delay or not approve, or they can give you a green light. If you're Jeff Bezos, you have contracts with the Postal Service to deliver goods. Contracts, Donald insists, lose money, but they've been studied and restudied, and they don't. They're perfectly reasonable and fair contracts, but that doesn't matter. And at the same time, Elon Musk is someone who should have no credibility whatsoever for many reasons, but here's one of the best ones. Elon Musk has sold millions of Americans, including a lot of them who've been writing to me electronically, that billions and billions of Social Security money is going to people who were born 150 years ago. Well, that's certainly what should upset people. Here's the problem. To make sure that bogus payments don't go out, if the Social Security Administration cannot definitively establish your birth date, they put in an 1875 birth date, and the computers are coded to not make a payment. So they took a very effective and inexpensive internal control to safeguard your tax money and turn it into a massive claim of fraud. And this goes right to the heart of how corrupt, dishonest, and uncaring about facts or truth these people are.
What is the long game at the Social Security Administration? I reported in the first half hour that the acting head stepped down, tried to push back. I mean, again, as I noted, you can count on a woman to finally try to push back against this guy, Elon Musk, and say, no, you're not getting into this most sensitive information as it pertains to Americans. In any case, she had to step down. Now there is a new interim head, and then, of course, Trump has someone in waiting. What is the long game at SSA?
Well, Mark, if you and I had gone to the Hollywood studios a couple of years ago and said, we got a great idea for a movie, the richest man in the world with no elective office is going to end humanitarian aid to the poorest people in the world so the children die of starvation and people with serious diseases come back, and then he's going to try and take away the Social Security money, which lifts enormous numbers of Americans out of poverty. Take Social Security away. For me, it hurts, but take it away from most Americans, they will be sunk into deep poverty. And it's the richest man in the world doing this. And I can tell you exactly what we'd be told by the people at the movie studios. That's such a crazy idea. No one would believe it. That's exactly what's going on here. The problem with people like Elon Musk is they never have enough. It doesn't matter how much you have. If you're Donald Trump and you're an empty vessel inside because of the horrible way you were raised, you try to fill that with adulation, flattery, and money, or the belief you have money, whether you actually have it or not. And there is no end to that. There is no reasonableness to it. And you end up in a completely immoral situation.
And so is there a self-enrichment associated with shutting down SSA? Is it part of the privatization that we saw hinted from the younger Bush? I mean, I don't know what the game is here.
On the margin, I don't think another $1 billion or $10 billion means anything to Elon Musk. This is about power and ego, and I know better than you do. I mean, one of the central elements of Donald that I quickly caught on to back in the 1980s is he really does believe that he's special and that everybody else is an idiot. They don't know what they're doing. Only he knows. And because he lives in this fictional world in his head, because he creates his own reality, and he gets people to follow him, he can do that. I mean, that was the great insight of the Yale psychiatry professor, Bandy Lee, before she was fired. She had studied how cults work and belief systems. And what she showed was that, well, it's not infectious like a virus. The mental illness of a leader can be transferred to the followers. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people. I was on local radio here in Rochester, New York, on the public station a week ago, and a guy came on and said, we're going to have the best 4 years ever, and no set of facts would permeate his belief system to the point where he finally said, I don't care what that guy says. I won't believe anything he says. Well, that's the problem. If your mind is closed, then it's like trying to talk to a cult member. And this will only change when the economic damage to these folks really gets severe. I've rewatched now a couple of times one of the many interviews on the internet of someone who's asked about Trump and what they think of him, and this woman praises him, and she's asked about the Affordable Care Act. What if it went away? And she goes, oh, no. I mean, I'm a single mother with 3 children, and one of them has this medical issue, and I desperately need that. No, they're not going to do that. And then the interviewer says, well, what about Obamacare? Oh, I have to get rid of Obamacare. And every one of these videos has a very interesting characteristic. There are basically 2 responses. Either, oh, I didn't know that. That's the uncommon response. The common response is, you're a liar. You're just lying. So if you don't have any reality to things. It's amazing what you can do. And Musk and Trump's game is power, absolute power.
The interesting thing about the press conference that we saw where he brought his child into the Oval Office and kind of had a co-press conference. And by the way, David, I had this thought at the time. I don't mean to be so pro-woman today, but it kind of angers me that we've had this masculine flex at the governmental level. And if any woman who was an assistant to the president had brought her kid, her toddler, into the Oval Office,
Fox News would be going crazy.
Exactly. It was just, but we let Musk get a pass, A, because he's rich as hell, and B, because he's a dude. That's what happened there. I mean, there's no way that would be permitted if it was a woman.
Donald's 3 older children all denounced him, one of them in a book, after he divorced Ivana, their mother. And then they all came back because they found out that nobody could pay them like daddy, and nobody in corporate America was going to pay them the way daddy would take care of them. But notice that the little boy, who's 4 years old, I understand, goes over toward Donald Trump and he turns away and turns all stiff because that's who he is. Years ago, I found out from a crew that did a promotional film with Donald and his second wife, Marla Maples, that Marla needed to adjust her strapless dress. And she started to hand the baby Tiffany to Donald, who leaped back and said, "What are you doing?" I mean, it's a man who's never changed a diaper. I didn't change nearly as many as I should have in my 8 kids, but I changed a lot of diapers. Donald's never changed it. He couldn't imagine doing something like that. And Donald has no empathy and no compassion is demonstrated by when he turns away from that kid and gets a scowl on his face. Now, here's the question I've been thinking about. Donald Trump doesn't like to be outshined. He was outshined in that press conference. Time magazine put Musk behind the desk, in the Resolute desk. Lots of people, not just me, have referred to Musk as the de facto president. And Donald hasn't turned on him. There is one likely explanation for which, let me be clear, I'm just going from 37 years of experience on Donald. Donald is somehow in hock to Elon Musk. Donald has not filed his mandatory Office of Government Ethics statement of all of his assets, income, and liabilities. It's not there. I just looked yesterday, so maybe it got filed today, but I doubt it. He's trying to end these filings, by the way. And he owes roughly $600 million, including interest, in the 2 New York civil cases, one in federal court with E. Jean Carroll, one in state court with the state over his corrupt behavior and dishonest behavior. He doesn't have that kind of money. But frankly, well, it wouldn't be pocket change. It would be a minor annoyance to Elon Musk. And so I suspect there's some understanding between them that has Donald in hock to Elon Musk. It certainly would absolutely explain what's going on between them. Yeah, there's, for those not watching on TV, the Time magazine cover with Elon Musk at the Resolute desk.
Yeah, there it is. Tony's got it up there. It's interesting. I was going to mention that in his sit down with Sean Hannity, we ran it the other day. Remember, Tony, the sit down with Sean Hannity. Hannity does almost like a 40 or 45 second, maybe even longer ramp up, describing how the media is trying to draw the two together in some kind of pitched battle, kind of talking about a divorce, talking about the fact that there's hostility between them. I don't know if you can find it, Tony.
Trying to drive a wedge between them.
Right. And it was as though they wanted to acknowledge it. Here it is. But it's not long. Just
it's just the picture. I can't find the video. So
okay. Anyway,
at least the picture.
But it was almost a tip of the hat to that. It was a way, I thought, of taking the buzz out of that story. Hannity was trying to do them both a favor,
Yeah. Well, Hannity often tries to do them a favor, and a few times he's fed Donald lines that could have saved him a lot of grief, and Donald doesn't get it, which tells you how unsophisticated he is as a thinker. He has some sort of fundamental core ideas, and that's the end of it.
But was a great example.
He's had nobody who's more of a friend in the news business than Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
Oh, by
isn't
the
it?
way, I'm sorry. Sean Hannity's in the entertainment business, except when he wants to say he's in the news business.
That's right. It's a convenient out for him. Now let me get to the IRS. An IRS employee who is with DOGE is apparently seeking access to the IRS system, and it is now fairly apparent that DOGE will now be all over the IRS and taxpayer accounts. Can you speak to that, please?
Well, the claim is that they're looking for people who are cheating the government out of huge fortunes. The IRS is incredibly tightly regulated inside. I covered the IRS for the 13 years I was at the New York Times. And the systems they're getting into are very tightly controlled. IRS commissioners and deputy commissioners don't have access to that system. And the system has controls on it so that we've had in the past cases of where people go, well, let's look up this famous actress or porn star's tax returns. You get caught if you do that right away because the computer knows that you have certain files you're allowed to get into. And if you go outside of those files, literally immediately, there will be people at your desk asking you what's going on here. And I've written about some people who had trouble because of this. In one case, I didn't write about this one because it got resolved, but they had simply made a mistaken keystroke, and the Social Security number they entered was for somebody they were connected to. It wasn't a famous person or something else. They got that settled. But why in the world would a non-government employee with no security clearance acting on behalf of an imaginary government office, DOGE? It's just a fiction. It doesn't exist except in the minds of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Have access to this sensitive information, so sensitive that Donald Trump was furious about my getting the front 2 pages of his tax return, he said anyway, because I think he's the one who sent them to me. And there's this constant IRS secrecy business going on. Now, let me give you the dark vision of this. They're also trying to have access to the complete Treasury payment system. Well, Donald Trump has a roughly $70 million tax refund that has been tied up for years. That's the reason he used as an excuse for not releasing his tax returns, even though once you filed your tax return, releasing them changes nothing. There's no reason, if you're going to do it, not to do that. If you have the IRS internal records and you have the payment records over at Treasury, Donald could get his refund paid out to him. He could have money paid out to friends and supporters of his who may have money tied up somehow at the IRS because it's under audit or other review. Furthermore, in criminal cases, once outsiders have had access to this, just imagine for a moment you're a tax criminal defense lawyer and you're representing somebody who defense is Donald Trump's after me because he doesn't like my politics and I wouldn't bow down to him and he's claiming I'm a tax cheat. Your lawyer is going to say, Your Honor, we can't rely on these Internal Revenue Service records. They have been corrupted by outsiders getting access to them, and you shouldn't. The government shouldn't be allowed, Donald Trump's Justice Department, to use them to prosecute me, and things like that. So, the claim we're going to find tax fraud by looking at those records. No, that's not how you find tax fraud. And these people aren't auditors. They don't know how to conduct audits. They have no idea.
This is exactly what I said about them just in general. I mean, this department that, as you suggested, is completely imaginary, but has been granted all of this not imaginary access to all of these government organizations. They are not people with administrative or managerial backgrounds. They're not accountants. They're in no position to evaluate waste, fraud, and abuse. We all want to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, but they've gone after, just as an aside, departments that aren't really typified by a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. But,
And AID is like one of the best examples of that. I mentioned last week that, there are times when humanitarian aid workers have to pay off cash to warlords to get food and medicine through to people. But, there are inspector general reports on AID going back a long time. There's no finding of any corruption or wrongdoing there. And what we're getting from Elon Musk and his minions and Donald Trump, arguably one of his minions, is, we found massive fraud and abuse. Well, really, where are they? Let's name some names. Let's produce things. If somebody who's 150 years old is getting a Social Security check, Dead people have no libel and slander rights. Put their name out there in the public record. And of course, they can't because it's all lies. But that's one of the crucial elements in setting up a dictatorship. And on Saturday night, Donald Trump wrote something that just stop for a minute and imagine this. Imagine that a president of the United States, whoever it is, declared himself to have dictatorial power. Think about the next day's headlines in the LA Times and the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Keokuk, Iowa, whatever it's called. President proclaims himself dictator. So Donald Trump wrote that anything he does to save the country, it can't be contrary to law. Very simple, short sentence. There's no fudge room in it. He declared he has dictatorial powers. So what are the headlines on the front page of our major newspapers? Oh, well, what does this mean? We're unsure. It seems alarming, but it's not completely clear because he didn't say more. And it's like, what is wrong with my peers that they don't? Yeah, he who saves this country does not violate the law. First of all, that is a quote wrongly attributed to both Napoleon Bonaparte, and I presume wrongly, to Donald's, as he calls him, second father, the notorious lawyer Roy Cohn from the McCarthy era. But just that
By the
misses
way, wait,
sort
let's
of.
stop for a second because that's fascinating. I always thought that was a Napoleon quote. It's not?
No, apparently there's no record of Napoleon Bonaparte having said this. And of course, he did declare himself dictator, right? I'm going to have the people put my crown
Emperor,
on my
actually.
head.
Yeah, right.
And went to prison. And Roy Cohn reportedly said the same thing to Donald Trump. And this is a clear, unquestionable, indisputable assertion of dictatorial power. And this goes to how my peers, who I've been trying and utterly failing, absolutely failed for almost 10 years now, to say, you don't understand who you're covering. This isn't a politician who's different. This man is a criminal. He's the third generation head of a 4-generation white collar crime family. He's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He makes things up. I mean, if he weren't president of the United States, I would say he has delusions of grandeur. A little hard to make that argument since he's in the White House. But absent that, he has delusions of grandeur. And he's mentally ill. And as Bandy Lee, who I was her only publisher for about 6.5 or 7 years, nobody would touch Bandy Lee. She said, Donald Trump is mentally ill, and he's got all these followers who are buying into his mental illness. And I think
she's the doctor, the psychiatric mind.
At Yale.
From Yale, exactly.
Yeah, and I think Bandy's been vindicated about that. And frankly, I think I've been vindicated when I've been telling people for all these years, Donald wants to be our dictator. He's now declared his dictatorial authority.
He's working from the playbook that you foretold in so many different ways. I wanted to quickly get your reaction to what's happening on the existence of DOGE and the power of DOGE. So the judge is going to rule today. I don't know if is the ruling. I've been doing the show and Kim's not here today. So, but 13 states were trying to block Musk and the government downsizing team, the DOGE team, and the Tanya Chutkan U.S. District Judge is going to hearing the case. Actually heard it yesterday, even though it was a federal holiday, and it was an emergency request by the Democratic state attorneys general. But so this would block DOGE, just to be clear. But it's now suggested that she may not intercede, that she may likely be reluctant to intercede here, which will be the green light for DOGE to go to run amok further.
There's another federal judge in another case who has said that Trump can go ahead with digging into the records of the education department, which include if you're a parent or grandparent who's signed for or your kid has gotten Pell Grants, all your financial information. And that judge has said they may proceed. And here's the problem with that. These people are not vetted government employees. For all we know, and I want to be very clear, I'm just giving an example here. I'm not asserting that this is the case, but for all we know, they could be Russian or Chinese communist agents. They could be career criminals, or in the thrall of career criminals. Maybe they owe money because they have gambling debts or something. No way do these private individuals for a fictional agency have or should have any access to this confidential information. And listen, it's not like I'm suggesting we shouldn't look for fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, I've been exposing that since I was a teenager in Santa Cruz. My whole career, a lot of it's been about exactly that, showing misuse of funds. That's not what's going on here. They're not looking for funds. They're looking to nakedly grab power, misinform people, and make assertions for which they have no factual backup, or at least are unwilling to issue any.
Well, the aggressive way in which they're slashing and dismantling various programs, there's been clearly a kind of abandon about it that has been so reckless. It has no, it doesn't pertain in the least. It has no adherence to a kind of examination of how efficient a program is, or if there's fraud, waste, and abuse. Witness the fact that they offered all of these early retirements to people across the board. I mean, you can't tell me across the board all those people should be getting early retirements. They're dismissing people who have distinguished records of service. It's an outrage. It really
in
is.
whom we as taxpayers have spent a fortune developing these people. Whether they're in military officers, diplomats, scientists, managers, we have huge investments in these people, and they're just swinging a meat axe that is going to do serious damage to us. And the one we really need to worry about is there are really deadly viruses out there, far more dangerous than COVID-19. The Middle East respiratory syndrome killed 1 out of 3 people who got it. 1 out of 3. We have corralled Marburg, MERS, and other viruses through USAID. We provide antiviral medications to people who are still alive, suppressing the virus in their bodies. We, in some cases, feed these people and help them in other ways so they don't travel and run the risk of exposing us. Now that we've cut off these medicines abruptly with no warning, those diseases are going to surge in the bodies of those people. It's going to spread to other people. And as soon as anyone who has that virus gets on one jetliner, this will start hopscotching all over the planet, just like COVID did. And we could have them right here in America. Donald doesn't understand any of that. If I could get Donald to sit down with me again and calmly try to explain this to him, he wouldn't get it, because he doesn't learn, and he certainly doesn't learn at his age now. He sticks to this. It's just like when he says China and Mexico and Canada are going to pay the tariffs, and he doesn't understand that no, consumers will not only pay the tariff, they'll pay the higher prices on competitively made American goods.
Well, you know, to be fair to Trump, which is an odd thing for me to say, but you're president, and you have assigned such a thing to people who presumably have knowledge of, in this case, you know, a growing pandemic or whatever it may be. And sadly, in this case, it's at HHS, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So he's put into place people who are of, to be kind, questionable competence. I mean, maybe
that's very, very polite.
To be blunt, I mean, incompetent. And we're seeing it play out. I mean, even their corrupt intent is being blown up all over the place. It's just such a mess.
Right. It is. I mean, we really are in very serious trouble, unfortunately, until it starts to really hit some of his followers, the poorly educated he loves, in ways that affect them, and hit business owners, small business owners. I had a senior Democrat in Congress tell me that he's had Republicans come to him and say, you know, I mean, I can't speak up against Donald, but I've got all these people in my district who are saying that they're going to suffer horribly from what he's doing. You know, there must be something we can do. And the Republicans are hoping the Democrats are going to bail them out on things like federal spending and the debt ceiling. And I suspect the Democrats are going to say, I'm sorry, you know, that's your kettle of fish. We've told you what we think is appropriate. We're not voting to bail you out. We're really in a problem here. And let me just, one other thing wasn't on our agenda to talk about. I just posted at my Facebook page and on B-Sky a Polish newspaper article, English version of their article. We have so damaged the Russian military without a single American being involved that more than half of Russia's war-making capacity is destroyed. They only have about 1 in 6 to 1 in 10 of the trucks they need on the front just to move things around. Russian and North Korean soldiers are dying at the rate of 1,500 to 1,600 a day. In World War II, with wars in the two theaters, we only lost 300 people a day. They're losing 5 times that much. Well, the Russian army now depends on donkey carts to deliver ammunition, food, replacement parts, etc. And the Russian ministry is defending this, saying, well, armies have always used donkey carts. Yeah, well, we used to have a cavalry too that rode on horses. And it indicates how really awful the situation is for Vladimir Putin and his collapsed economy. And yet Donald Trump's minions now are meeting in Saudi Arabia, where the U.S. and Russia are now, as the New York Times just put as its lead story on the online front page, suddenly becoming partners after decades of hostility. And they are going to decide, we and the Russians, what's going to happen to Ukraine. Ukraine isn't even invited to the meetings. This isn't a peace talk. This is a how will we force Ukraine to submit talk.
That's exactly right. And Tony, find that there's a picture actually of them meeting in Saudi Arabia to decide the fate of Ukraine without Ukraine at the table. Let me ask you, just as a follow-up to that, David, do you think Europe? I've heard that Europe may form their own coalition to support Ukraine because they're very threatened by Russian expansion, of course.
Yeah, the Europeans all understand, and I've been there a number of times now in the last 2 years, that they are threatened by Putin. And this is Putin's own words. You don't have to know some skullduggery. He's said many times what he intends to do, and he's been consistent about it. So the British have just revealed that they don't have sufficient military capacity to both defend Estonia, which they're required to do under some treaty I was unaware of, and provide troops in Ukraine, but there, if necessary, are going to send troops to Ukraine. The Germans, the Poles, the Germans, the Danes, the French all have made it clear that they have to do something about Putin and Ukraine. And if they do it at their expense instead of ours, well, that's sort of a good thing for us. It also means we will have far less influence in the future going forward. But to allow Vladimir Putin to be rewarded for his illegal aggression. Remember, Russia had signed a treaty with Ukraine in 1993. We will never, ever, ever enter your borders. And look what's happened. So if that succeeds, if Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin succeed in forcing Ukraine to give up about a fifth of its land, you think President Xi in China isn't going to be emboldened to invade Taiwan, to impose his full will on Tibet, to build even more islands in the South China Sea, like the Spratly Islands additions, and say, you can't go through this territory anymore in your ship without our permission because it's no longer open ocean? This is
well, that's
disastrous.
Really provocative. David, I see China as something that at least Trump has articulated is a priority for him. There's an adversarial relationship that he really has spoken to often when it comes to China. And I don't mean to suggest that he's underpinned by any kind of coherent strategy or understanding of the world, but I'm just saying that he's mentioned that before. So I'd wonder what his reaction is. I'm sure he can be bought off in whatever his view is of China. But
you're talking about Donald can be bought off.
Yes, that's right.
Not
Donald
Xi.
can be bought off.
Xi is a very sophisticated, highly educated man.
Oh, no, not Xi. No, I'm talking about Trump, who doesn't have any kind of, as I'm saying, his view of the world is not underpinned by anything at all.
There's no principles there.
Right. I've got to let you go. I've already taken way too much advantage. It's great to talk to you. And I look, there it is, the Gulf of Santa Cruz.
Andy, my son Andy, who's a truck driver in Albuquerque, will be very glad when I tell him that you put this up there.
I love it. What up, Andy? Thank you. Thanks, David K. Johnston.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
So cool to talk to David K. Johnston. I put that up there, Tony, the Social Security thing that I had sent you earlier, because I had meant to mention it to David, and the Inspector General audit, this one we were talking about Social Security and the fact that, he's going after, and Musk and the DOGE folk are going after organizations that are incredibly efficient. I mean, there's always inefficiency. But look at this. The Inspector General audit from 2015 to 2022, Social Security sent out $71.8 billion in improper payments, most of which were overpayments, out of $8.6 trillion in benefits. That's an error rate of 0.84%, less than 1%. So when you talk, SSA issues over $1 trillion in benefit payments annually. Even the slightest error in the overall payment process can result in billions of dollars in improper payments. For example, from 2015 through 2022, SSA paid almost $8.6 trillion in benefits and made approximately $71.8 billion. Again, that 0.84% in improper payments, most of which were overpayments. These audits show you that SSA is an incredibly efficient government organization. The idea that you would go after the Social Security Administration is laughable, literally. It is laughable that you would go after USAID. That's not to say that every program in all of these different organizations is sacrosanct. But the kind of recklessness that DOGE is going after American government with is despicable. So when you look at SSA, IRS is the same story. I told you at the beginning of the show, the IRS is one of the great revenue streams for this country. Of course they're going after the IRS. Of course they're going to dismiss people at the IRS at the highest levels, just like they did in the first Trump administration. They fired a bunch of people who were involved in what at the IRS? Remember? White-collar crime. They went after those who were investigating high net worth individuals. That's what they're doing again, because they're high net worth individuals. It's the oligarch. It's the plutocrats. They've taken over. And by the way, again, I'm not against rich people. We all want to be rich. I'd love to be able to fly everybody watching right here to some island for a wonderful week of discussing politics and all, and I'll pick up the tab because I'm wealthy. So I've got nothing against it. I'd love to be able to fund various charitable organizations because I've got nothing but dough. Nothing about being rich is necessarily bad. But when you game the system so that you don't have to pay back in a system that has given you so much, yeah, that's loathsome. I'm not cool with that.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.